So one of the great things about the DJI Osmo Action 4 is this camera has a much larger sensor than the Action 3 did. And usually larger sensors equate to better low light performance. That's not always the case, but generally that's the case. And the Osmo Action 4 does do better in low lighting than the Osmo Action 3. But it is still important to have the best settings keyed into the camera to get the very best results. And in this video today, I'm going to go through those best settings, and I'm also going to share a lot of sample clips that I filmed using the Osmo Action 4. And if you're interested in seeing a comparison in footage between the DJI Osmo Action 4 and the GoPro Hero 12 Black, there's a video I've linked to at the end of this video that shows the sample footage from the GoPro Hero 12 Black. So let's get started on the best settings that you need to know in order to get the very best low light footage on the DJI Osmo Action 4. Alright, so first thing we want to do is power on the Osmo Action 4. And we want to make sure we're in video mode. And then what you want to do is you want to start here at the bottom. And for the resolution, I recommend doing 4K 4:3. And part of the reason for that is that's going to make the gyro data available, which we may want to use later on to do a little bit of stabilization of the footage. I'll talk about that in a bit. When it comes to frame rate, you want to use either 24 or 25 frames per second. And that's because that's going to allow us to use a slower shutter speed, and that's going to work a lot better in low light to get better lit footage. Rocksteady, you want to turn that off. And when I go to turn that off, you can see right here the text. It highlights which modes in wide angle have the gyro data available. And 4K 4:3 right there in the 24 to 60 frames per second. And that's part of the reason we're choosing that. But DJI also knows what is going to give the best results. So after we've set those initial settings, what we want to do is we want to toggle down, and then we want to go over here and click on these icons right here on the right hand side for the additional settings. So you want to make sure Pro is selected up here at the top. And then a lot of our key settings here are going to be exposure. In the exposure here, there's a couple settings we want to change. We want to first of all go to M, because we want to do everything manual here. And what we want to do for the shutter speed, so we want to go way down all the way to 1/50. Now, not only does that meet the 180-degree shutter rule, so you will have good motion blur in your footage, and it's going to look and feel great. It's going to have a cinematic feel to it, but that 1/50 is also going to allow a lot of light into the camera, which is going to be really beneficial for low light. And then over here for ISO, we want to set a static value, and we want to do 800 there. Anything above 800 gets kind of noisy and grainy, so I don't recommend going above it. 800 is kind of that balance of good-looking footage without too much noise or grain. And as you can see here, we're in the middle of the day here, and that footage is way overexposed. But in low lighting, like the sample clips I'm showing in this video, it looks great. So once we've done that, we're going to hit confirm. And then for white balance over here, you want to adjust this down to somewhere between 3200 and 4000K. I generally like about 4000K. I feel like that does the best in low lighting, like in an urban area, but it's totally up to you. If you want it to be cooler, you can go down here to 3200K. You can see more of the blues in there. That can look good in a lot of low lighting situations as well. For the color profile, a key here is you want to do D-Log-M. D-Log-M is going to ensure you have footage that you can grade later on. And with low lighting, that helps a lot to have footage you can grade. If you really don't want to grade, you can do color normal. But if you do color D-Log-M, that's going to really help you take your footage to the next level. And if you haven't ever graded D-Log-M footage before, I've linked to a video above that talks about cinematic best settings for the Osmo Action 4. And in that video, I go through grading and I show you exactly how to do it in Adobe Premiere Pro. For the field of view, you want to keep this set to wide. Keeping it set to wide is going to make sure you have that gyro data to use later on. And then down here for image adjustment, you want to make sure sharpness is set to -2. You want to have the lowest sharpness possible. And then noise reduction, you also want that set to -2. It's going to give you really good footage later on. It's not going to have that noise and grain, and you're going to be able to really grade it and get some fabulous results. Now, the one question I know you might be asking is, even with the gyro data, your footage is still going to be shaky. And a key for that is you want to use a gimbal. Now, there are 3 different gimbals that I recommend using with the Osmo Action 4. I've linked to those in the description below. The 3 gimbals I recommend are the Hohem iSteady Pro 4. That is the lowest cost budget model. The one that's mid-range would be the Moza Mini Max. That one's a good gimbal as well. And then finally, the higher cost one, the DJI RSC, and that one is a good gimbal. But for the sample footage, I did use the lowest cost Hohem iSteady Pro 4. And then what I did is after I filmed using that, I put the footage into GyroFlow to finish the stabilization. And GyroFlow is open source software, so there's no cost with it. And it does a great job stabilizing Osmo Action 4 footage. So I recommend doing that combination instead of just holding this handheld. Because if you do handheld, your footage is going to have a lot of shake. And when you stabilize it in GyroFlow, it's going to crop it a lot more than you probably want it cropped. So I recommend doing that. And then if you don't want to use a gimbal and you want to be able to use Rocksteady, there's a couple settings you want to change here. And really that setting is going to be the shutter speed. You want to adjust that to 1/200. If you do 1/200, you then can go back here and turn Rocksteady on. And it will stabilize the footage without having ghosting and jitter in the footage. There might still be a little bit, but it's not going to be noticeable and terrible like it would be if you had Rocksteady on with a slow shutter speed. And that's because Rocksteady needs those nice, crisp, sharp frames in order to function properly and to line up the motion in each frame to not have that jitter and ghosting. But you do need to take note that when you set the shutter to 1/200, your footage is going to be a lot darker. So that's a trade-off to not have to use a gimbal. So your footage will still look better than if you do the auto shutter speed, but it's still going to not be lit as well as it would be if you have a shutter speed of 1/48. So keep that in mind. So let's take a look at a couple minutes of sample footage that I filmed with the DJI Osmo Action 4 the other night, using the settings that I provided here with the shutter speed of 1/48 and the gimbal combination.